to the Fantasy Footballers DFS Podcast, coming to you from pristineauction.com studios with your hosts, Jake Ciely, Chris Meaney, and Joe Holka.
Welcome, Foot Clan, week 14. This is almost done. DFS for the rest of us. Fantasy Footballers DFS Podcast. If you're not part of the DFS Pass on the site, where you can get the articles that Chris writes, I write. There's a ton more on there to make you get your winnings out. I mean, we're getting a lot of tweets, and they'll be like, hey, look at us, because I think we're good at that. We're not like, look at what I smashed in my tournament this week on DraftKings, but not mentioning the 90 tournaments we didn't do well in, like some people. But we usually retweet the people who you guys who come to us and say, thank you, I won this, or thank you, I won that. And I think that warms our hearts and warms our souls. What did you say that, guys?
I think I have more fun sweating your guys' lineups than my own these days, so it's always fun to see those tweets come in that you guys had a good week. It makes it all kind of worth it, I guess.
This is the time of the year, Jake, right? Unfortunately, there's some people out there, maybe their season-long leagues are completely over. This is the first week of fantasy football playoffs, for most people anyways, in season-long formats. So hopefully we bring in a few more listeners and viewers, of course, and hopefully people keep winning.
Well, speaking of viewers, if anybody's watching this video, and if you're not, you might want to go check it out on Joe's Instagram and YouTube and all that type of stuff. But I am sporting the Pete Carroll bandaged nose. That's also representing Barkley, who's next to me. She got spayed. She didn't handle it in the cone so well. That's where this came from on my nose. And yes, I have to wear a Band-Aid because it's that bad. She cut open the middle of my nose with the cone because she was freaking the hell out from that thing.
It's the moneymaker, man. I can't believe you let that happen.
Yeah, what a loser, Jake. Oh, jeez.
Yeah, I know. No, it's Pete Carroll because he's finally using Rashad Penny, so I have to give him support. Thank you for finally using him.
Yikes.
You guys ready to just roll right into it? Although I feel like, did you guys even do the 3-man last week that somebody always sits out in?
Blame me. I did it 2 weeks ago, and I think it was just you and I, Jake. And then last week I was not in it.
I can't even give Chris crap this week because I don't think I was in it this week either. But you did send me your lineup, Jake, so it looked like you had a pretty good week, though, right?
I did have a pretty good week, and that's why I was interested. And I checked it. It was like, hey, your contest didn't run because the other two people were in it.
Yeah, it's too bad because I know that Joe had a good week as well, and I was all over the Rams. So, I mean, probably would have been a pretty good fight between us. Let's make sure we do it this week, fellas.
Yeah, I think Jake's lineup, you were what, like a 1 point? It would have been probably came down to the wire. Like I had probably one of my best weeks of the year, but I know your team was right there, man. So it would have been a good 3-man.
It was, and it was actually the worst naked Jameis that I've ever had because
he didn't do a whole lot.
No, because damn Ronald Jones didn't do much either because Peyton Barber took everything. Well, let's jump into running backs and let's talk cash for this week and get you guys some money.
Straight cash, homie.
Speaking of cash, I forgot to mention and also say if you put in the code podcast, you get 10% off that DFS package. So make sure you guys are doing that. And we'll start at running back as always. And the question that continues to be the question every single week, Joe, you going back to Christian McCaffrey? Christian McCaffrey did not pay off last week. Christian McCaffrey did not pay off last week, even if he was down at $9,000.
I think the thing is, like last week, like he was like 60% owning cash. So even if he didn't completely get there, like you probably were still okay in your cash games, even in tournaments. Like he was so heavily owned. Like the tournament, I took down a couple of small field tournaments on FanDuel, had McCaffrey, had Fournette, like basically getting floor games from those guys. I had Tyreek Hill in that lineup for crying out loud. Like it's just really for this type of volume. I still think that this time of year, I will say that maybe they end up kind of scaling it back a little bit, but I don't know. It still seems like a fine price tag for that type of volume. When this is a slate, it feels like there's more running back plays than we've had in recent weeks. Like it's been kind of tough sledding at running back the last few weeks. So sure, I think McCaffrey is always in play. It gets the weekly permission for people to jam him into their lineups. I think you can make it work. I don't love a lot of the value so far, so hopefully we get something to open up, like what kind of opened up last week at tight end, etc.
Yeah, I think that's dead on. It's just trying to find some value, and it just doesn't seem like there's a ton, at least not that I like anyways. So I guess it remains to be seen whether Dalvin Cook is going to play. Like if Dalvin Cook doesn't play, then all of a sudden you got Madison in there who's pretty cheap, and he's going to be chalky. But if you're a cash game player, you like what we're talking about right now, I think you just take that quote unquote free square and you plug him in and you just move on. You get McCaffrey in there, and then you can spend on other guys. But yeah, it's the same thing we've been saying, I think, all year. If you can find a way to get CMC in there, you go ahead and you do it.
See, think you can try on FanDuel, but again, I'm just not doing it on DraftKings. I don't think you need to on DraftKings. Two of the top 5 predicted ownerships are chalky plays, and they're actually 2 of the guys I was in on, and I'm actually disappointed that they're chalky plays. So I'll give you my 2, and then we can circle around back, because it's not number 1. Joe's other boy is number 1, which we'll get to at one point. But for especially the savings, Chris, I'll give you the 2. We've talked about it on Throwback. I put him as in a sleeper, quote unquote, because I just want people to be able to trust him, whether or not you're trying to make your playoffs or trying to win your first playoff game. And then for DFS, if you're going to give me Devontae Freeman at that price, who in his first game back was out there for 2/3 of the snaps, that tells me they don't want to keep screwing around with the rest of those running backs. First game back gets that workload. And then he has the matchup of matchups who just made Adrian Peterson, Darius Guice put up top 5 numbers on about 10 to 12 touches each.
Yeah, it makes sense. That you said against the Saints when he came back, he got that full workload, and Brian Hill was just thrown away. But, I mean, Hill was in this situation before against Carolina, and he wasn't great. I know Freeman hasn't been all that efficient. He's a better back.
Yeah, don't put Hill in the same conversation as
right,
Freeman.
But, I mean, it's kind of close because, yeah, I think Freeman is better than Hill, but Freeman hasn't been all that good. And then they make the coaching change, and you wonder if Rivera was fired because everybody is running all over them. So how different of a defense are they going to look this week? I get it. I mean, I'll probably have a few shares, but I don't think Jake, honestly, even at 5-4 on DK, that I will play him in cash, even if he's going to get 20 touches. Yeah, I just don't think he's all that good. And you'll get Julio back and Hooper potentially back this week, so maybe that'll open up the offense slightly, but I mean, we haven't seen a good Freeman game yet this year, have we? I mean, maybe a couple early on, week 4 or 5. Yeah, I mean, I get it, but I just won't do it in cash.
Because he gets the rushes. I'm putting him in basically everywhere.
Jake, I think I'm kind of with you. I'm going to back you up on this one. I'm on Freeman at 5,400. He had 17 carries last week. He had 5 targets through the air as well. Like, Carolina is like one of the worst teams at defending the run in the entire league. And this time of year, I mean, nice total at home. Like, there's a lot of things that just, I mean, show me that I think that he's just pretty drastically underpriced at 5,400. I think Chris hit the nail on the head. If we don't get Alexander Madison, like, we're going to need, I feel like, one of these slots to gain a little bit of savings, because wide receiver looks a little bit tougher this week than I think we've had in weeks past. Feels like a more wide open week in general, so I'm hoping something comes up. But if we don't get Madison, I do like Devonta Freeman, I think, as kind of the clear pay down option at running back, and I think in cash games he's super safe.
I definitely like him a lot more on DK, Jake. I mean, because of the volume that he's had this year through the air, right? 5 targets, 4, 8. He had a couple games, actually, with at least 8 targets. So, I think he's a better price on DK at 5-4 compared to FanDuel, where you only get the half point and he's 6K over there.
Well, see, the thing is that I like FanDuel is the price is more favorable over there, so it kind of offsets that, what you're talking about. Like, while the price is, prettier, obviously it loses the half point per reception. So I think it balances out. Either way, I love him. All right, so I'll go to Joe first on this one, since he supported me on that one and you didn't. So haha. So we'll see if he supports me on this one too. I actually don't think you will, Joe, because I feel like this is a backfield where, you always want your volume guys, and I feel like he deserves it, and he's been getting it since he's come back, hint, hint, and it's in a great matchup. Austin Eckler can get his, but so can Melvin Gordon, and I really like Melvin Gordon. And I went to you first because you can bring in your boy on the other side of the ball. I think both of them are in play this week.
Man, we're surprisingly aligned. Like, sometimes we're a little bit on the other side, at least of the running back position. I like Melvin Gordon this week. He's 6,400 on DraftKings, 73 on FanDuel. Yeah, like, ideally we don't want to kind of target these backfields where there's such a committee, but I don't know. Again, similar to the Carolina matchup, like Jacksonville, one of the worst teams against the run in the entire league. Like, Melvin Gordon's volume has been scaling up pretty consistently over the last few weeks. Like, I mean, for this type of price tag, saw 20 carries last week. Like, he's still, I mean, he actually was 1 yard shy of the bonus as well. Like, his pass game involvement isn't elite by any means, but I think in this matchup, like, and the price, I think he's got to be one of the guys that you're considering paying down for. He seems like in that range, I think he's stronger than Josh Jacobs. I don't know if you guys disagree when it comes to that. But Fournette on the other side, they don't want to move his price on FanDuel, which just seems kind of crazy to me. I don't really get it. He's 7,500 over there. Yeah, I don't understand. Like, his workload is so unbelievably safe. Like, the Chargers, again, another team that's not strong against the run, but in particular, running backs in the passing game, 28th at defending those passing game running backs. And I don't know, seems way too. I don't understand his price on FanDuel, so I think he's almost a lock on FanDuel. DraftKings, of course, like roster construction might lead you away from that, and maybe you have to pay down to Melvin Gordon in the same game. Like both these guys, I think you can play them both because they're both pretty game script independent. as well. Yeah, I'm in on both of them, man. We're aligned so far, Jake. Good for us.
I'm with you guys too. This is kind of why I was a little hesitant on Freeman, just because I want to have both of these guys, right? I mean, I want to spend up at the running back position, but I understand if you want to get CMC, you want to try to find some value. I don't think Cook is going to play, so like Madison is definitely, I think, going to be in play regardless. I think actually, if Cook is even active, I think Madison becomes an interesting play. I know we're talking cash, but in tournaments. But yeah, Fournette, I mean, 23 targets and 18 catches over the last 2 games. I know GameScript has really favored him in terms of just getting all of those targets. You wonder with Minshew back under center if this is a more competitive game, but even still, as Joe alluded to, the volume has just been there with Leonard Fournette. And on the other side with Gordon, I mean, Jacksonville's given up a touchdown to a running back in every game since week 8. I mean, they've just been torched, absolutely torched. So I love both of those calls. I think they're both in play in tournaments and in cash.
All right, so I got one more for you guys. This isn't on mine. This is a question for both of you guys. And I'm asking it because he's not the starter on his team. But for his price and who he's facing, which we've said this entire year, backup running backs play him against Cincinnati. And since seasonal, Kareem Hunt has already been dominating as a backup to begin with. Is there any way you touch Kareem Hunt because the price is still super low? He's already been great against regular teams, let alone the Bengals.
I don't think it's super low. I think it's to the point now where I don't want to pay up for. I don't want to pay 6.6 for Kareem Hunt and his 13 touches.
Yeah, I don't think the price is low at all. That's the exact thing I was going to say, Chris. He's way too expensive.
He pays $6,400 on FanDuel.
It's
still too expensive.
That's why I brought up the question.
Fair. It is fair because it's the Bengals, and he has been productive. You're right, Jake. He's getting catches. If he finds the end zone, sure. But I think he really does need to find the end zone. So I think he's just a little too expensive, and I actually like Nick Chubb. I think I would go to him.
I was going to pivot right to him, so you can talk about him because I love Nick Chubb this week.
Yeah, I guess we're not breaking news here with the Bengals and their run defense and how bad they've been so far this season. 157 rushing yards allowed per game. So I mean, Nick Chubb is still getting a ton of volume, a ton of work. He's touching the ball about 18 to 20 times a game. So I like him, and we can't just gloss over Henry either and how good he's been. Right, we got to give Joe some credit with.
Bring him up.
Yeah, I know he was ready to tee him up. Probably we got to give him some credit there. Let him take it away. But I mean, Derrick Henry, at least 140 rushing yards in 3 straight games. That hasn't happened for a back since 2012 in AP. Like, this guy has just been an absolute beast. I know, Jake, you had some numbers on the throwback and just like in the second half of games, but again, I think we said it last week, ever since this point last year, he's basically been a top 2 running back in the league. He's been unbelievable. The touches are there, the carries are there, the yards are there. He's top 3 in everything that you can imagine that you want. Touches per game, carries per game, yards per game. He's against Oakland too, and only $8,200. He's a great
His price on FanDuel is pretty bad though. It's up to $9,100 on FanDuel.
Yeah,
I brought it up because Joe likes to bring it up, not because he was because that's he made him my boy, because I just brought up Derrick Henry every single week. I will say this for everybody out there listening. So I asked D'Angelo Williams on the podcast that we do. I asked him about we hear the cliche, wears down the defense, gets stronger in the second half. And Chris, you mentioned it was Ben Gretsch, CBS, tweeted out a stat about Derrick Henry over the last 4 games. Something like 30-something rushes for only 100 and some odd yards. But in the second half, it's like 50-something for 406 touchdowns. It's like ridiculous. So I asked D'Angelo that. I said, we're sitting here and the common thought is, he gets stronger in the second half because he's a beast, because he's so big, he's hard to tackle. You don't want to tackle him. And he said that's true of most running backs, unless you're talking about like scat back level running backs. But any running backs, like even your 210-pound guys. He said because what happens in the second half, if you can find a running back, and this is probably something we should look at, what Joe always talks about for volume. This is where you should look at those kind of guys, because a running back in general, if he's guaranteed the touches, he's going to be getting the workload in the second half of the game. D'Angelo said it's not so much even the running back. It's the fact that the linemen have 350-pound guys leaning on them the entire game. So it's like playing MMA the entire game, and what it's like trying to hold yourself up against somebody else, then also trying to tackle somebody. And he said breaking tackles is much more hard. If he said you try to break 1-2 tackles inside of 5 yards, you're expending more energy than running off an 80-yard play, because that's just how hard it is to break a tackle in the NFL. So everybody's worn down in the second half. So if you can get down there, that's why running backs overall get stronger. So I bring that up to say all that, to Joe's point. You chase volume all the time. You can find somebody with 20 touches. There's a good chance those bigger runs are going to happen in the second half anyway.
Yeah, chasing volume is one thing, but chasing, I've talked about it before with like guys like Alvin Kamara, guys like Leonard Fournette. Like quality of touches matters, especially in DFS where we're so price sensitive. Like I want guys that are going to catch passes. Like sure, Henry made a ton of sense to me the week where he was 6,900 and we just didn't have any value on the slate. Sure, at that point maybe you take your 20 touches on the ground, hope he goes nuts. Like I mean, I talked about this a good amount too. Like total yards from scrimmage over the last 4 games is one of the only efficiency metrics I really look at for running back, and Derrick Henry is like leading the way over the last 4 games in that way. So I mean, all the calendar narratives with Derrick Henry later in the season, sure, I understand all of that. There's not a chance I'm paying 9,100 for him on FanDuel. There's not a chance I'm playing Chubb on DraftKings either. I don't like either of those guys, if I'm being completely honest. I do think that Fournette is just severely underpriced on FanDuel. I just can't imagine paying 1,600 more for Derrick Henry. So I'm struggling with that a little bit.
I'm with you on that.
So I think that for me, I would just prefer to go all the way up to McCaffrey, play Fournette. I think there's a couple of guys I'm really all over Devonta Freeman at 5,400. If you're paying down, I just would prefer to get a decent savings when it comes to that. These other guys just feel a little bit overpriced to me, and maybe that's just my biases coming out. Have been, I guess, well documented that I struggle with these type of plays, and these are the type of weeks where it can come back to burn me too. So like we actually have these guys all in really strong matchups as well. Like there's a reason Chubb is in play. There's a reason Derrick Henry is in play. It's because these guys that they're facing can't stop the run. So these are the type of weeks where, I mentioned that I really like a lot of plays, but it's also a week where some of these plays that I typically don't go to could just bury me if some of the other guys don't go off.
Jake, when you talk about ownerships, is that Freeman up at the top? Is that when you led the 2 guys
Leonard
that you
Fournette's
like?
number 1. Leonard Fournette's 1. Freeman's 2. Gordon, McCaffrey, James White, and
Chalk Freeman. Oh boy.
I know. I wanted to bring up James White. I don't think there's any way you pay $6,000 on FanDuel. 5,500 on DraftKings. I could see some people chasing that. Now obviously he's number 5, but I wanted to go the other direction. Chris knows where I'm probably going with this, Joe. So I'll go to you first on this one. Let's talk about the team that James White just did it against. And let's talk about volume. Let's talk about the fact that Philip Lindsay doesn't have the snaps, but every time he's on the field, he's touching the dang ball because he's got like 16, 14, 20 touches in the last 3 games. He is touching the ball every time he's out there. And this is the Houston Texans team that just let James White go bananas in the passing game. The fact that Philip Lindsay's 5,300 and 6,400, I think more appealing on DraftKings, but is he in your consideration on DraftKings because of 5,300?
I think he's okay. It's more of a situation, too, where he always feels like he falls somewhere in that kind of in-between range in terms of his touches, and it seems safe, but he hasn't really had, like they're not going to lean on him in this spot. I would be shocked at that. So if he gets there from a tournament perspective, I think he's going to have to break some big plays, which, like you said, for the matchup could certainly happen. Those are just typically the type of things at the type of chances I don't take at the position, and maybe that's if you're playing large field stuff, of course, like guys like that, you're going to need to differentiate a little bit in that mid-range. You're not just going to lock in someone like Devonta Freeman into 150 lineups, so you're going to need some other guys in that price range to make some salaries work, and at 5,300, I think that he's totally fine on DraftKings. 64, I think, is a little bit pushing it on FanDuel. In particular, I just really struggle with these running backs that have super low team totals as well. Like, we need touchdowns. It's like any position. So, like, I would prefer just to pay up for someone like Devonta Freeman with a 25 implied team total in comparison to someone like Lindsay with 16-point team total.
Yeah, I would agree with that, too. I think it's a good point when you're looking at just team totals. How many points are the Broncos really going to score? And you alluded to it, too, Jake. Like, Freeman had more snaps than this guy. And he didn't have more touches. He wasn't more involved. He had more targets, more catches, which is a little surprising, I guess. But I typically, I agree. I tend to, especially in cash, I tend to stay away from a guy that's had fewer than 10 DK points in 3 straight weeks. But I could see the appeal in tournaments.
All right, so more tournament. Anybody at running back cash-wise before we move on to wide receiver?
What do you guys think about Le'Veon Bell? I know he was sick or something, right? Missed practice, but I don't know. He's probably a little bit overpriced too. But Miami. If we're talking matchups, like I think he's still in play. I don't know.
I feel like we bring up Bell every week, and we just kind of like just
Chris. You know who Le'Veon Bell is?
About him.
You know who Le'Veon Bell is? He's Will Fuller. Because we bring him up every dang week, and he hasn't hit. He hasn't hit since week 1 against Buffalo.
I was like say like he's had 20 points 3 times, but he hasn't actually hit. You know what I mean? Like those 20 points.
Isn't that the reason to play him? Because he hasn't hit yet. He's been getting volume.
It is.
Say he's due,
I'm playing. I'm literally putting him in my FanDuel lineup right now.
I think in tournaments again, I was sick of writing him, and I even joked last week when I wrote him up in the DFS Pass and tournaments. I said, guys, I just can't write Bell up in cash, but in tournaments, he's gonna hit one of these times, and the time to have him is when everybody is. No, it's just because he does have that skill set. It is Miami. He's not the same Bell as in Pittsburgh. He just, you know what I mean? Like, we all know that. Again, it's not breaking news. He just hasn't, in Pittsburgh, he had those 30-point games. He had those CMC games, right? This is a guy who's averaging 14 DraftKings points per game.
Yeah,
like
he's just a regular cow. He's not a bell cow.
Yeah. There you go.
I'm completely on the other side with this one this week. I don't know why. For some reason, I just think that, like, this is the type of situation you look for in tournaments. Like, the volume is there. And there's a reason I bring up guys like Will Fuller, too. It's because he's seeing the type of volume that makes sense for a blow-up to happen at some point. Like, that's what you want. So running backs, like, I would take a shot on Le'Veon Bell every single time versus some of these super thin guys that are, like, 5K. Like, I just have no interest in those guys.
I agree.
Here's
I agree
my
with
issue.
that.
He's still number 9 in projected ownership.
Okay, so maybe people are on it. But maybe since he's been sick and missed practice, I don't know. I just think I like this game overall. I want access to this game. This is like my favorite game on the slate. So that's kind of why I was at least looking.
Well, I have plenty of access. If we get to wide receivers, we can talk about that. I have plenty of access. Freezing. So real quick, we don't have to talk about Patrick Laird because he's tournament, right? Yes, tournament. We'll save him because the only reason I wasn't even going to talk about him, but he's right there with Le'Veon Bell in projected ownership. So was there another name besides stupid Bell that you guys want to talk about? Here's the thing. The Jets, if everybody's listening, one thing to do with me is if I say something about the Jets, go the opposite way. Because until last week, I found when Robbie Anderson hit for me, all the weeks prior, Chris knows this, all the weeks prior, whatever I said about the Jets, the complete opposite happened. So whatever I guess this is the week to play Bell because I'm saying I don't want to play Bell.
Man, imagine thinking that a guy that's going to touch the ball 22 times against the Dolphins is just a terrible play. He's got to be in play.
Is he going to touch the ball that much, though? I mean, 10 carries, 12 carries.
You could be right. I've got him at 18 right now, so maybe that's a little bit aggressive.
That's fair. 18's probably fair. I mean, we're splitting.
When the coach / GM / Lord of psychoticness up there is ruining this team, in addition to the offensive line, in addition to the most overrated quarterback presently playing, because every time Sam Darnold does anything good, people, oh my God, can you see the potential? And they just ignore the 5 games prior, but. Can you tell I kind of hate the Jets, but I love the wide receivers.
I think so, yeah.
Can we jump to the wide receivers because I do love the wide receivers?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. I'm not on Robbie Anderson. I'm on Jamison Crowder in this game. I'm pivoting away for Robbie Anderson for the Crowder play, but also you want to guess who the number 1 projected wide receiver is?
It's not Crowder.
No.
Robbie?
No.
Oh, Parker. Yeah, obviously.
There you go.
Yeah, now's the time probably to get off Parker, as good as he's been and as much as we've talked about him. I mean, he's basically been a sponsor of this show. Mm-hmm. He's like 56 yards and a touchdown in every game but week 2. Like, honestly, I feel like we bring up Parker every week.
I was a little bit late. I was late to the party on that one, but made up for it last week at least.
Yeah.
I mean, is he too expensive now? It's 6'9". I mean, he's more expensive than
6'9". 72 is not though.
Keenan Allen, Odell Beckham Jr. Chark, like there's some guys here. Boyd, mentioned Boyd last week. Yeah, DJ Moore. Like he's more expensive than a few guys that I have some interest in. I don't know. I think I may. It pains me to say, but I think I may have to fade Parker this week. I might play him in cash. I mean, man, I'm so confused. It's just like double-digit targets every single week, but I don't want Parker at like 45% ownership. I just don't.
Well, right now it's 20. And, that's probably going up because,
45 is over-exaggerated a bit. But, yeah, 20 plus.
I mean, already at 20, it's 19. I rounded up 1%. But, so if you look at 19, 20% as of Thursday, that's a really high number, period, for wide receiver. Let alone what I'll tell you is, how about we drop $400 on DK? Does that sound good? How about I'll ask you the FanDuel question second because they are the same price. But if you drop $400 on DK, Chris, you get Jarvis Landry.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like Landry and Beckham. I know the Bengals defense has been a little bit better lately. Carlos Dunlap, Defensive Player of the Week. I mean, they've played some weak teams over the past 3 weeks, but they have been a better unit. But Landry has he's been so consistent. He's top 3 among wideouts and targets over the last 6 weeks. Like every single week, this guy is getting double-digit targets. He's found the end zone. Odell's had that top coverage, and it's just opened things up. I don't know if Baker's going to play. I think at that price, like cheaper than Parker, I think both of those guys are in play. I think Cleveland's an interesting stack in tournaments.
Yeah, it's one of those situations too where like we were talking about Hunt earlier and Chubb. Like I would just much prefer to go to the passing game in this spot. So totally with you there, Chris. I think that Odell is really interesting. So like if you can just looking at like their metrics are all very similar outside of one very key one, like yards per out run. Like Odell is like really down on that. His total yards over the last 4 is really bad as well. So like on paper, Jarvis looks like the better play. I guess I want to know what ownership's going to be like. If it's going to be drastic one way or the other, like maybe it is a time to kind of jump on OBJ as like a little bit of a buy low. Like Cincinnati, like just give me all these guys against Cincinnati, like 32nd best team at defending the deep pass. So if they are going to see some of those types of targets, like those are the type of guys I would be super interested in. And like those are mid-range price basically. Like wide receiver, I feel like a lot of these guys are kind of juiced up. Like Tyreek Hill's over 8K, Michael Thomas over 8K, Devontae Adams 8K. Like all these guys are expensive. Parker 6,900, DJ Moore 7K. Like you can't play all these guys anymore. So it's nice to have a little bit of a mid-range option as well with these Cleveland guys. So I'm with you, man.
All right. So where else you got? I mean, I do have others, but where else are you looking, Joe?
I think that someone that's super interesting this week is Christian Kirk. If we wanted to kind of move a tier down in salary, 5,200. A lot of people played him last week in particular. 5,900 on FanDuel is still a really nice price point for him as well. He's still someone that's top 12 in weighted opportunity over the last 4 games. So I think that everyone that kind of played him last week isn't going to want to go back to that spot. Not a fantastic matchup by any means against Pittsburgh, but they are at home, and I think that the volume's kind of always there for this Arizona team, and I want the guy that's seeing the most valuable target share, and to me, that's still Christian Kirk.
Where are you on that, Chris? Because I'm fading this game from the Arizona side altogether.
Yeah, you and I talked Monday about Kyler, and I just I'm out on the Arizona offense too. I don't love the matchup. I think it's an interesting contrarian play if you want to go Kirk in tournaments. I totally get it. The upside is definitely there. But yeah, what I said to you on Monday is just I know they wouldn't rush and put Kyler out there, their franchise quarterback if he's not 100%, but he just didn't look the same. I know he ran one in, and he didn't look like the same guy against the Rams, and Pittsburgh is no joke. The defense is pretty solid, so I'm kind of out on Kirk again, just a tournament thing. But some other wide receivers in this range, I know I mentioned Boyd, but if Cleveland is going to roll, I mean, Boyd has averaged 10 targets per game with Andy Dalton under center. The offense has looked a lot better with him, so I mean, I don't mind him. I mentioned him last week. He turned out to be an okay play. Zach Pascal, he's probably going to be pretty chalky, but if we're talking about him in cash, I mean, who's there with the Colts? Like, there's just so many injuries in Indy, and 10 targets, 7 catches, over 100 yards last week. He's had some decent games. He's had some games where he's disappeared. He hasn't been there, but without T.Y. Hilton, you go back to week 7, he had a good game, a 100-yard game there as well. He had a 72-yard game against the Raiders in a good spot. So against the Bucs, I mean, I don't mind that play.
I don't mind it. I'm fading him in tournaments because you know how I feel about the wide receivers that can't handle being the number one. The good side of it is that the Bucs don't really have anybody that can handle a number one, let alone a number 2. So for that game, I mean, he's the 5th highest projected ownership at wide receiver, and that's why in tournaments I'll just steer clear, and I'll try to find somebody else in that price range just because of that concern. And who happens to be in that price range? I'm going to go back to it, Jamison Crowder. Like, everybody's on Robbie Anderson, deservedly so after last week. Everybody's on Zach Pascal. Everybody's on Michael Thomas and DJ Moore and Devontae Parker. Those are actually your top 5 over at Fantasy Sports, by the way. And Jamison Crowder, outside the top 15, that's my pivot play. And Jarvis Landry. Jarvis Landry's he barely squeaks into the top 20, and I'm actually shocked by that.
Where's Odell on that list?
He is 2 spots behind Landry, 1 spot behind Tyreek.
Okay, so not completely forgotten about.
I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4 more spots. Now outside the top, he's 25th, and you guys didn't bring him up. And I'm going to plug him in there. I don't care that he's big play reliant because guess what? He's getting the volume. He is the number 1. He's going to be in my lineup until his price goes up. James Washington.
Ooh, interesting. I kind of am on the other side of that one. I think just from a price perspective, I prefer Deontay Johnson. But I think that more has to do with kind of where you like to beat Arizona on the field. So I think both guys are totally fine. I honestly don't have a huge take one way or the other, but I think that the other one was kind of my first instinct. So what kind of puts him in terms of Washington over Deontay for you if you just had to have one of them?
Talent.
Okay, fair.
and he goes duck hunting with his boy Hodges every week.
In all seriousness, the
position where that matters.
The usage has been there, and then if you told me 10 targets for Washington, 10 targets for Deontay, like let's say Deontay got the same amount. Let's say they both get 10 targets. the big play / ability period. Those are like, so the big play ability, I kind of did like a Wheel of Fortune where you connect the middle word as the big play ability overall. It's significantly better in James Washington for me, whereas he can turn 10 targets into 7 for 150 and 2. Deontay Johnson probably turns into like 5 for 90 and a touch.
That's fair. I think the one thing that I did like about both of these guys, their yards per out run is very high. Washington at 6K is a tough one to click for me. I think that's kind of why I was just looking to pay down if I was to go to that spot. I have a little bit more interested in this Arizona and Pittsburgh game than it sounds like you guys do. I think that at least the target share should be relatively condensed. We'll talk about Vance McDonald, the tight end, but I think is a little bit overpriced as well. But we'll get there.
The Arizona, they knew that was coming. Both sites planned this out. It was like, yep, we're just going to kind of artificially, anytime somebody's facing Arizona, boom, 20% price increase.
Yeah,
except for Higbee, because they thought Everett was going to play. Yeah,
that's true. All right, so where else are you looking, Chris?
For cash, I don't know, man. Like, other than some of the guys we've mentioned, there's a couple that I could bring up in tournaments a little bit later on.
Well, we'll save them.
Yeah, we'll save them. In cash, there's really nowhere else. I mean, maybe Edelman.
Well, then let me ask you.
Again, in that price, like Parker is 6'9". Maybe I'll just like spend another $200 against KC for Julian Edelman. I mean, in cash, again, like it's just a guy. You have to go all the way back to week 5, where Edelman hadn't had double-digit targets, and he had 9 in that game. So it's just a guy that you just know every single week he's going to get you from 15 to 25 DK points. And it's exactly what he's done in every single week since week 4 against the Bills.
Yeah. All right, so let me ask you, and then, Joe, same question to you, so follow it up. I'm going to give you wide receiver 11 and 16. And I'm surprised their ownerships are this high, but they're sub 5 and sub 6K, so I kind of get it. Mike Williams and Curtis Samuel.
These are two guys that I guess haven't done a good job with overall this year because they always seem like they're seeing valuable targets, but I guess you have to kind of differentiate where those targets are coming from too. Like these are always buy low guys, but like as far as catchable targets go, I think these guys have to be, considered as some of the ones that definitely have some more volatility there. So I don't really like either guy, to be completely honest. If I had to pick one, I think it would probably be Mike Williams, but I think there's at least 2 other guys on the Chargers that I like more.
Jake, when's the last time you've seen a wide receiver lead the league in yards per catch and have 0 touchdowns? It's Mike Williams.
I'm not.
It's hard to believe.
Bureau, so I don't have that off the top of my head.
Okay, all right. Give you too much credit there, I guess. No, but 20.5 yards per catch.
Well, we have both.
0 touchdowns.
Yeah. So that, and then not DJ Moore, Robert Woods leading in almost receptions and no touchdowns. Like both of them.
Amazing. I mean, Williams didn't do a whole lot as a rookie. He was behind the 8 ball. I think he basically had like a fractured back, neck that rookie season, 0 touchdowns. And then last year would have 8 or 9. And then this year, 20.5 yards per catch. It's unbelievable. I don't remember the last time I've seen that. I mean, Kenny Golladay is second with 20.2. He's got 9 TDs. I mean, Hardman is 19.6. He's got 5. Washington, you mentioned, is in the top 5 as well. He's got a couple scores. So, you wonder if eventually those touchdowns are going to come. He is that big play guy. I mean, the yards right there. He's a red zone target for Phillip Rivers. The Jags have given up a ton of points over the past couple weeks. I think I would go there in tournaments, but I'm a little hesitant in cash. But it's just interesting. I just wanted to bring that up because usually the leaders are Marvin Jones, Sean Jackson. These guys are always fun in the end zone.
Well, then you answer the other question because he's tied for 12th, Robert Woods, in receptions at 64 with 0 touchdowns. The other 2 people, and then one with 63 have 6, 4, and 7 touchdowns. Who gets the touchdown first, Mike Williams or Robert Woods?
Oh, man.
Mike Williams, but maybe they might have to go to Tyrod Taylor.
Which one would you take, Joe?
I think I'm on the Woods side of that. I kind of liked at least what I saw last week, but it was against Arizona, so maybe take that for what it's worth. But I don't know. It's both of these guys have been really frustrating. If you've been kind of following along with their target share, like they should be underpriced, but there's got to be something to be said for these guys that just like literally never get in the end zone. Hopefully they can kind of regress back to the mean in that. But yeah, I think Woods for me, but I'm still going to kind of wait and see on both for now, I think.
Right, and see, that's the difference between regression and being due. Being due is not a thing because both of them technically both of them have been on a positive regression turn for weeks now. But if they're quote unquote due, that means they should have hit, and then they should have hit, and then they didn't hit last week, and so every single week they're technically due for a touchdown. It's the positive regression. Well, that's over 100 scenarios. You're eventually going to get it, but that's a whole other story for another day. I will tell you guys this: I'm not going naked Jameis this week because I'm putting Chris Godwin in. I'm chasing it's not perfect, but it's as close as we can get to some predictability in the fact that when they're tied or with the lead, it's Chris Godwin time. When they're down by at least a touchdown, and that's the problem. The down by like the field goal into that range of like right there, that's where we kind of get really sketchy. It's hard to predict, but the down by the touchdown or more is a lot of Mike Evans, especially for the air yards, which you're just bringing up for Mike Williams, Chris. So I am going with a little sneak preview, Jameis Winston and Chris Godwin this week, because I feel like this is a win game and a controlled game. Not a controlled as in like I actually think there's going to be a lot of points in this game, period.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. I mean, I can't argue Chris Godwin. I'm not going to play him.
Even in cash? We've been staying away from these guys in cash.
I have been staying away from both of them in cash. But I still think that you could. I'm more in the mindset that I want to spend up at the running back position. So if I'm going to spend up for two backs that are near 8K, then it's going to be hard for me to get in Chris Godwin. But
right.
Yeah, I mean, you can switch your mindset up a little bit. You can go Freeman if Cook is out. You can go Freeman, Madison if you want, and then you can really spend up at some of these wide receivers.
Joe, I did what you suggested last week, and they both cashed.
Yeah,
I did the Winston with Godwin and the Winston with Evans, and they both hit only because I had Woods and Parker in both lineups.
I'm telling you, man, if you did that the whole season, you'd be extremely rich right now. I think in terms of Godwin and Evans, one thing that is really nice about that situation is like both of those guys together have finally kind of climbed above that 50% of the team's targets over the last 2 weeks, and that's where they were most of the season. But there was like kind of a 2 or 3 week dip there where they were spreading around a little bit more. I guess that's one thing that's a little bit of a concern is Jameis has only got 28 and 33 attempts in those spots in particular. So I think that going back to one of them is fine. Godwin is the one that I've kind of skewed towards at that price point most of the season. So mostly aligned with you there. I think that there's been spots to attack with Evans, but this one I think shapes up a little bit better for Godwin with Indy kind of they're willing to kind of give up some of those underneath throws for sure.
All right. Anybody else before we move on?
What are you guys doing? Go ahead, Chris. There's one other guy I had, but go ahead.
Well, I was just going to bring up some of these top dogs like Thomas and Tyreek. Are we afraid of the matchups?
No, if you can find I'm not afraid of Thomas. Tyreek, but Tyreek's more of a tournament because Thomas I know is going to always get his volume. Tyreek, just because of that offense, just because of him himself. I mean, it's 3 catches, and he could turn 3 catches into 120 yards and 2 touchdowns. But right. I don't know if the volume is there in this game, and that's my only concern of why I would move to him towards in a tournament.
I think Tyreek, I mean, he was basically what held my team back from having a legitimate Sunday million sweat last week. So if I sort of played Adams in that slot. So maybe I have some, I'm a little bit upset with Tyreek right now. But I guess maybe I'm misremembering this, but the last time they played New England, didn't they have a ton of safety help over the top to kind of try and defend Tyreek a little bit? I'm not sure if they're going to do that again, but it's hard to
do anymore.
Yeah, maybe not. They have so much talent there. Maybe it really doesn't matter. But 8,100, yeah, I think he's tournament only for me as well. I have a little bit. I guess I have some concerns with this New Orleans and San Francisco game overall. I originally thought that maybe kind of taking some price discounts on these Saints would make some sense. I guess how strong San Francisco has been against quarterbacks kind of that remain in the pocket has been pretty substantial this year. So I'm not really on Michael Thomas this week at the top end. At the top end, I think I guess would prefer to kind of maybe even just move down a tier to some of these other guys we talked about in kind of the mid 6K range.
I think Adams is in play. I think Devontae, we brought him up last week in double-digit targets in 6 straight games now, 5 straight games, 4 since he missed a few, right? He was absent from week 5
Josh
to
Norman's been
week
benched.
8. Yeah, no, is that a good thing?
Actually,
or a
might
bad
be
thing?
a bad thing,
right?
For Devontae Adams.
Agreed, 100% actually. But for Adams, I mean, double-digit targets. The one thing with Rodgers is interesting because it's been a whole lot of running backs. I was looking at Aaron Rodgers just a little bit deeper in terms of just fantasy points. I mean, he's failed to hit the 15-point mark in fantasy in 7 of his 12 games this season, and 12 and fewer in 3 of his last 4. But he has taken advantage of some soft matchups. Last week, he took advantage of a soft matchup against the Giants. I think this week is a soft matchup against Washington. There is that fear that double-digit point favorites at home that they'll just use Adams or Jones and Williams nonstop. But even still, if they are up big in the second half, then you figure Rodgers and Adams probably hooked up a couple times. So I do like that price. I just have a little fear in cash that it could be just the running backs, which we've seen all year. But Adams is trending up. He's found the end zone 3 times, I think, in his last 2 games. So I agree with Joe. Thomas, there's ways to get him involved. Those little quick slant routes, those easy catches that they always seem to pull off. But if I was to pick one of the top, 5, including Diggs and Jones, I think Adams is for sure the one I want to play.
All right. Any others? I mean, we kind of were like, I don't know, and then you start throwing like 5 names out.
I just want to talk about those top dogs. Just
wide receivers hard this week. There's really no one even like sub 4K that I like right now, which is scary considering some of the guys we're going to be trying to get in. Auden Tate's 4K. Maybe he's got something coming his way. I could kind of piece around at least some sort of argument for Auden Tate as kind of a regression guy too. But I don't know. I think it's really thin down there this week for sure.
All right. Then let's talk quarterbacks, since you guys brought up a lot of quarterbacks in that discussion. And, I mean, you know where I'm going. I just basically, if I can find a way to plug and play Lamar Jackson, I feel like now it's this week he's finally getting the Russell Westbrook, Christian McCaffrey treatment, and it's kind of hard to get him in there. So if I don't, my immediate pivot is straight to Jameis Winston, and I'm done. Like, those are my 2 picks, and I'm done. I've been doing it all year long, and as you mentioned, Joe, it's been working all year long, so I'm not going to go away from it now.
I mentioned this last week, I think, that the Jameis one is something that I struggle with personally because I really value efficiency at quarterback, but there's got to be a point, too, where volume has to be in your consideration. So, like, Jameis, like, at that point, like, he's got to be in your consideration every week. Like, his average intended air yards is actually leading the entire slate. 10.3 is a massive number for that. It's ahead of guys like Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Ryan Fitzpatrick. Like, Jameis is going to huck it deep. So, I actually have some interest in the Indy defense, so I'm not really on Jameis this week. One guy that is actually pretty interesting to me overall is Ryan Tannehill because he's 5,800. And I don't think we've played him much recently because of how much they've been running, and that's certainly a concern. But I do think that against Oakland, and talking about a guy that throws deep, like Tannehill, I don't think is getting enough credit this year. Like he's 9.1 yards per attempt. Like again, like that's one of the highest on the entire slate. So I'm in on that in particular because Oakland is one of the worst teams at defending the deep pass in the league, 30th there, and he's going to give you a little bit of rushing upside as well. So Tannehill at 5,800. I think that it's a really nice price for him this week, and when we're going to be kind of trying to find some savings somewhere.
Yeah, 9.1 leads the league.
Yeah.
Unbelievable, Tannehill, and he's second in completion rate, 72.7, and he runs around. We've brought him up a couple times. I know Jake likes to, what is it, the Counting Crows? Yeah, you're running around.
Running around this town, corn, whatever they're saying.
Yeah, whatever they're saying. They're
town
saying Ryan Tannehill is going to get paid and bring the Titans to the playoffs. My goodness. But yeah, I like that price, 5.8. Against Oakland, you want to spend down even more. I mean, your boy Minshew, wanted to save him for you, Jake. I don't know if you want to go that way. I mean, 5-4? 5-4? Right? We haven't even brought up any of the Jags wideouts. We just kind of...
because it's a bad matchup.
It's a bad matchup for Chark, but is it a bad matchup for Westbrook or Conley?
It's all of them. It's going to come down. Look, one of them is guaranteed to hit. I'm going to say guaranteed. One of them is guaranteed to hit.
That's why you just play Lenny.
Yeah, true.
So there you go.
Don't even mess around with those guys.
Or no. To
or
your
just
Chris's
play
point,
naked Minshew.
No, but naked Minshew. But when we go back to what do I say, Chris? Buy the cake, not the icing. Buy the Beowulf cake and enjoy it.
Buy it. Yeah, I mean, Locke looked okay, I guess. I mean, Sutton found the end zone twice last week.
Okay, I guess.
It was, I guess. Like
I
watched parts of that game. He was.
You better not pull me off naked, Jameis, because he's not naked. You're making me think twice now. All of a sudden.
You should at 5.4. How much are you going to save from Jameis? Oh, only a K, only 1,000. But still,
only a K. That's actually pretty significant. And the
I know
price
it is.
He's 1,100 cheaper on FanDuel.
Yeah, that's not bad.
I like Minshew. I think I strongly prefer Tannehill for 400 more. Minshew's 6,600 on FanDuel, though. That's like a pretty crazy low price tag over there. So I think that's where I would probably go there if I wanted to.
Yeah, he's locked in.
Yeah.
Wait, he's 56? I thought he said
66.
No, he's 66.
66.
Yeah.
Oh, he's 66. Some of these other quarterbacks that I think I would spend up on, if Thielen plays, I think I'd play Cousins. I mean, Cousins has been pretty solid. He's been pretty consistent. I mean, you have to, again, at least 18 DK points in every game but one since week 4. Again, it'd have to be Thielen. I just the matchup is great against Detroit. I know maybe they'll get up and they'll run, but I have a hard time spending up for quarterbacks. I know 6-7 seems like a lot. I'll probably honestly just have a lot of Minshew and Tannehill. Week 14, let's go.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that. You know,
Yeah.
hey, we're talking about all my favorite people. So this is fun. Well, Tannehill. Whatever, Tannehill.
Well,
Anybody else at quarterback that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've skipped over one of the best games on the slate from a fantasy perspective, this Jets and Dolphins game. Let's go. Let's go. I like Darnold a bit too, which is, I guess, really... I mean, we talked about all these guys we like. We might as well talk about someone that's in play that we don't like a ton of. I don't know. He threw the ball 48 times last week.
He did last week.
I mean, I still think that this is there a better get-right spot than Miami? I don't know. He's 6K, so you're not getting a big discounted price.
There's a better get-right quarterback. It's anybody. It's just forget the fact, oh yeah, he's gonna get right. Well, watch him go belly up again. I hope he goes belly up again. Screw you, Sam Darnold. He's in worst place for me. You don't
play
know
him, Jake. Play
no,
him.
He's in worst place.
You know, because you put him in worst place, he's gonna ball out this week.
Yeah, he's gonna throw 4 touchdowns and 400 yards.
Well, you love Crowder.
Drive to New Jersey and stab him in his freaking eye.
You love Crowder.
Brooks. I want to edit that too.
What? I said stab him in the eye. I didn't say stab him in the heart. He can still live. Yeah, I don't think you'll notice anything different in his passing game with one eye.
You guys realize when you make more work for Brooks, you also make more work for me, and when I have to edit the YouTube, right?
What's wrong with stab him in the eye? I didn't. It wasn't like the festival I was talking about earlier this year.
Yeah, fair enough. I don't know.
Callback that nobody knows about.
I guess I'm a little more interested. If the Jets, if that's where I stand this week, that's a little bit scary. But I like Darnold quite a bit in this spot. Like when they played earlier this season, this was still a game that was nice from a fantasy perspective. So I don't know. This is the time of year where you have to do some weird things to be different. And I think this is a spot that could be like kind of an underrated shootout with some pretty clear options in terms of stacks. So I'm kind of in on it, I guess. I think Darnold's okay. I prefer Darnold to Fitzpatrick, which is probably bad, but that's where I'm at.
Chris.
Say to that. Yeah, I actually like both. I agree with Joe. I mean, I like this game. I think there's going to be some points scored, and yeah, it's hard to get away from either of them. And Fitzpatrick is he just keeps slinging it. He just keeps slinging it. I mean, no matter what team he's on, he just forces the ball to his number one wideout. Gesicki showed up. Shout out Gesicki, Joe. Last week, he was getting some targets.
You want to just go to tight end so you can bring him up?
Well, I mean, I'm just to the point where Fitzpatrick and Darnold are they're throwing the defense on either side. I mean, the Jets have some players on defense, but even still, I think both of these quarterbacks are at 6K. I think they're both in play. If I had to choose one, it may be Darnold. First place.
Full Jets onslaught on my team in the 3-man this week for sure.
Do you want to go? You're going Gesicki at tight end?
I don't know about that. I still think Parker's okay. I guess I'm not willing to jump off that train after I just kind of got on it a few weeks ago. So I might write that out a little bit longer. I think he's priced where he should be at this point. But yeah, Gesicki's fine. That's the great thing about Miami is you have a pretty good idea of where the ball is going to go, I think, unless you're on Patrick Lair Island with a couple guys on Twitter recently. So I don't know. I think that he'll end up actually drawing a little bit of ownership on DraftKings, especially if we don't get the Madison kind of free square to open up, hashtag free square. But I don't know. Tight end stuff, I think Gesicki is definitely in play if you guys want to go over there. I could do my Gesicki victory lap, but last time I did that, Jake was just like, oh, you bring him up every week and then he smashes. Well, he's got touchdowns in back-to-back games. So how do you like me now?
All right, we can certainly go there. I'm not actually the Gesicki price is just it's not bad, but I'm dropping down even further. I don't know about you, Chris. I don't want to steal. I'll wait for last for mine.
Yeah, interested to see who you're going to drop down to. OJ Howard? No chance.
No, don't try to guess. Just
yeah, I mean, I don't mind Gesicki again. I like that. I like that matchup. Gesicki Griffin, they're both in that kind of that same price range. Griffin's got that Q next to his name, so who knows, where the ownership's going to go there. Jack Doyle, I think, is in play again. He was pretty chalky last week, but he paid off for us. With all those injuries in Indy, 11 targets, 6 grabs, 73 yards, found the end zone. He's been great when Eric Ebron is not around, so I don't mind him. And then obviously all the way up at the top, I mean Kelsey. I do like Kelsey if they're going to try to find a way to eliminate Tyreek Hill. I don't know who is going to be carrying the ball in KC, and I don't think it matters. So I don't mind Kelsey, but that's more of a tournament play, I think, than a cash one.
You know what's kind of scary? So Travis Kelce, second on the slate in routes run over the last 4 games. You know who's number 1 and number 3? Gesicki and Vance McDonald. Yikes. So, like, I mean, that's something that I'm paying a lot of attention to at this position, of course. Both have pretty low totals, good matchups. Jets and Arizona, of course, below average against tight ends. So, yeah, I have no issues paying up for Kelce, but I think there's some cheap options. I want to hear Jake's really cheap play, because that's obviously what we prefer to do at tight end. So I'm I'm more in the mid-range this week.
Vance.
Yeah.
There's
nothing else to say. He's 4,300. He's playing against the Cardinals.
But the price that they slapped on him, I mean, it makes it less appealing.
He's $1K too expensive.
Well, because the biggest thing, so if I'm going to pay up that high, and I already did it for one lineup, I'll give you a hit. So for that high, I found an extra $400 on FanDuel to get Darren Waller.
On FanDuel, I don't think you can justify the Vance like at 5,800. No. That's egregious.
It's amazing. Yeah, he's just had a brutal year, but it's Arizona. So you'd be silly at this point. Watching them last week and just Goff, I mean, he made everybody. He was throwing the ball around to a lot of people, but every time he threw the ball to Higbee, he was completely wide open. There's absolutely nobody around. I mean, you can go back all year to this matchup. So, I mean, again, you'd be silly not to have one lineup.
2 games and 1 player it didn't work out with. It didn't work out with the Saints and Josh Hill. It didn't work out with Tyler Eifert and the Bengals. And Evan Ingram actually didn't work out because it went to Rhett Ellison. Screw the freaking Rhett Ellison ruining everything in that game. But no, so I'll give you the one because, again, the Vance McDonald, and also to your point, Chris, over on DraftKings, if you go up 300, similar to the up 400 for Darren Waller, if you go up 300 from Vance, you get Jack Doyle. So yeah. I just think, to your point, Joe, like when you see the price in that range. So I'll give you somebody who ran 87% of the snaps last week, who was on the field a ton. Target percentage has been a little bit inconsistent, but we like his quarterback we've already brought up. He is 3,100 on DraftKings. He is 4,900 on FanDuel. He is the Jonnu Smith.
It's interesting. I don't hate that. I mean, I'm a Jonnu Smith truther just because of what he's done in preseason DFS. But I don't, outside of like the matchup looks pretty like middle of the pack, but target shares important. And that if that's someone that we can pay all the way down for, I don't like anyone else all the way down there. So I could get behind that.
Him and Tanny? Yeah, I have no problem with it. He's been pretty quiet lately, but I actually don't mind the matchup. I know they've been decent against tight ends, but yeah, against Oakland, you can pass on them for sure. Should we keep an eye on the weather? Would that change your mind at all, Jake? I know we brought up that on Monday or Wednesday.
Weather doesn't affect me until so for everybody out there, I included in my article over at The Athletic every single time. There's a link at the top to when I talked about it earlier this season. Weather concerns. Just remember the easy numbers, 15, 25, 35. Yeah. 15 plus wins, you start tie breaks. It's still not that big of a difference. You still play your studs, but if you have a tie break and you're trying to flip-flop between, that's your tie break. 25 plus wins, now you start benching people. And then 35 and below, you start benching people, mostly in the passing game. The running game, actually, the only way I felt like this article that did the study, the only area that the running game really ever takes a hit, it's not rain, it's not snow, it's not wind, it's not coldness, it's when the temperature gets to 90 plus, which kind of makes sense because these players start getting exhausted.
I think one thing, too, and I think I mentioned this last week, but Adam Levitan, he brings this up all the time when it comes to the wind and weather, is we have no idea what the wind is like in the stadium. And I think that's something that you're never going to get from your weather app. So, I mean, taking it a step further, this is a spot where you probably do need to kind of dig a little bit deeper and see what the beat writers are saying in the stadium, like what the conditions are like on the field. So it's a hard thing to quantify. I totally agree with Jake that at least historically that 15 mile per hour wind is when things start to drop off a little bit in the passing game. So yeah, like keep an eye on it. But last week totally missed, just thought that this KC game might go a little bit lower on than it ended up being, especially on FanDuel. Like Tyreek Hill still ended up being extremely popular. So I think sometimes you can talk yourself out of good situations. Don't blow up all the research you did all week just because someone on Twitter is freaking out about the wind on Sunday morning. That's a great way to lose money.
And then we always know LaShawn McCoy is a beast in the snow, so maybe we can get a snow game before the end of the season. Mm-hmm. All right, so anybody else before we move to tournaments? Jack, thumbs up. Good?
Yeah.
Chris, good for you?
Good.
All right, well, let's talk tournaments.
You down with GPP?
So I'm going to tie these together, Chris. Defenses. We're starting there because we didn't do defenses in cash. I just want to know who you're looking at because usually, I don't know about you guys, but I'm pretty much playing the same defense. It's just defense. Like I don't really differentiate between a tournament lineup and a cash game lineup for defenses.
Yeah, no, me neither. I typically, the first thing I tend to do in tournaments is look down at the very bottom to see which defense I can plug in.
So you started from the bottom, now you're here?
No. Starting from the bottom, now I'm here. I did mention Cleveland a little bit, but the Bengals at 2-1, interesting slightly. The Colts, I know Joe alluded to them. They're kind of interesting too. And anytime you can go up against Jameis, and the guy's going to drop back 40-plus times to throw the football, Colts. But and again, said this a couple times in the show, not breaking news here, but the Packers at 4K, if you can find a way to get them in against Washington and Haskins, I like that play as well.
Yeah, I think one of the ones you mentioned, I do the same thing. I just look and see like who's really cheap to start, especially on DraftKings. So I think Cincinnati at 2,100 is the one that I'm kind of in on there. Get a bunch of awesome pressure rate data from Sports Info Solutions, and over the last 3 weeks, Cincinnati 44% pressure rate against Cleveland's offensive line that I would say is probably bottom 5, bottom 8 in the league against Baker. So I think you'll get some leverage there because I could see these Cleveland guys at least gaining a little bit of ownership. But I think that's the cheapest that I've kind of looked into. Obviously at the top end, I think it's pretty clearly Green Bay and Minnesota in terms of raw points. So if you can get those guys in, I think that still might be a week if some value opens up that we could make some teams work with some of those expensive guys in tournaments as well. But in cash games, I just almost always would like to pay down.
Yeah, I just put the Falcons in both lineups just because of the cheap factor, the turnover potential, Kyle Allen, and rush. They get pressure. They not consistently, but they've been getting more. And then if you're going to force Kyle Allen to potential few turnovers, I just don't love any. That's the problem. I don't love any of the defenses that are in like that second, third tier, like that make me say like, "Ooh, I want that." So I'm not going to pay up to get to the top. So it's just it was Atlanta everywhere for me. So all right, so tournament running backs, Patrick Laird. I'm going to bring him up because there is no more Kalen Ballage ruining things in that backfield. But what if it's Myles Gaskin's time, guys?
Exactly. And did they sign Zach Center?
Yep.
Yeah, they did. Zach Center just keeps finding new teams.
He really does. This is his third or fourth.
Good for him.
Love me some Zach Center.
Yeah, good for Zach Center. Does he have more teams than carries this season? Yeah, I think he may. But
revenge game against everybody.
Laird, I guess. I don't know. He could be in play, maybe one or two tournaments. DK especially, because I feel like it's his involvement through the air. We didn't mention Alvin Kamara at all. I know it's San Fran, but at 7K, any interest, guys?
I like it. I mean, you don't have to talk me into some Alvin Kamara.
It's as cheap as he's ever been.
It feels like he's been on a positive regression for the entire season.
True. What do we think about his health? I think that's what you have to ask yourself with Kamara. Like, does he look normal out there? Like, ankle injuries for these type of guys, it's just been like something that could linger on the entire season. So, I don't know. Yeah, he's probably overpriced. Him versus Le'Veon Bell, I don't know. Maybe that's the call in tournaments if you're looking for a guy that's going to be a little bit more off the board. I don't know. And no one's going to play Kamara against San Francisco, so I'm totally with you on that, Chris.
Yeah, what's his ownership looking like, Jake?
For which one? For Kamara?
For Kamara. His yards per carry number has been pretty good recently. 5.8, 4.9, 5.5.
It's pulling it up right now. He is seventh right behind Derrick Henry and right in front of Nick Chubb. So I'm just going to take Nick Chubb every single time.
Ugh.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I prefer Kamara to Chubb, actually. We could do a little prop bet on that one if you want.
I think on DK for sure.
We don't remember any of them anyway, so
that's true. Well, wasn't our last one was like the two most egregious players of all time. They were like both sub 4K. Probably neither one saw a target. I don't know.
So, speaking of which, I'm kind of glad you said that. How about Darwin Thompson, fellas? 4,000,
no, absolutely not.
5,000.
Yeah, I'm not.
Absolutely not.
No interest whatsoever.
I think they signed Spencer Ware because they don't. I don't think they like what they've seen in Darwin Thompson. I know he was like decent towards the end of the game. He got some run because the game was out of hand. But why did they sign Spencer Ware?
Because they just need they need a third running back. This is Ajayi with the Eagles. He's not touching the field.
He knows the system. Yeah, I know he's not touching the field, but I just feel like maybe Andy is not set on Thompson. I don't know. I'm not going to mess around with these KC backs. I mean, if Damian plays maybe in a tournament, because you can pass.
But that's the thing. If no Damian and you're down to Darwin and McCoy's not going to get 15 touches. They've proven that. They're in this whole NBA rest mode thing.
It's too much of a mess.
Absolutely
it's just Yeah, these just three backs. Like what last week they all had right around the same amount of points.
But I'm telling you, they're down to 2 is what I'm telling you.
If it's down to 2, yeah.
Yeah, I would take the flyer on Darwin Thompson. I would.
I think I'd rather just play Shady. If I'm going to choose one of them, everyone's going to play Darwin. I'm going to play Shady.
McCoy versus Shady.
Sure. I mean, I've been backing Shady all year as the better back in that.
I'll give you one. No. I got one. I got one for Joe. Chris, you can tell me if you want in on this too. So I will tell you if there is no Damian Williams, so it's down to McCoy and Darwin. So both Williamses are out. Daryl's already on the IR. So if they're both out, I will take Darwin Thompson versus Kenyon Drake.
I'll take Drake's side of that for sure.
Exactly. I knew you would.
100%.
100%.
Yeah.
We'll do it.
I'm in.
You in, Chris?
I don't think it's close in terms of projecting their touches. I don't think it's close. I think Drake is. I mean, he was one of the guys I was going to bring up.
$1.67 exchange rate, Meaney?
Yeah.
I don't know if it's that bad, but yeah, I'm in. I'm in on. I'll take the Drake side too.
Let's go.
Okay. All right. So who else? And who were you just saying that you wanted for tournaments, Joe?
No, I think that Drake is like almost like the pivot off of like kind of the Devonta Freeman range. So he's 5,200. Freeman's 5,400. Like basically same price on FanDuel. So I kind of like the Drake play. Like I think I've got him for projected for about 18 touches as well. Like really similar usage, like worse matchup. So he's like no one's gonna play him. But yeah, no, I think Drake's totally fine in that range. I think that if there's one cheap guy outside of Devonta Freeman and obviously Madison's a complete lock if he plays, I think Drake's like my third favorite. I think I would play Drake over Phil Lindsay.
No. That's another one. I'll take Phil Lindsay too.
Okay, I'll take Drake again. I guess I might have to put Drake in my lineup right now.
You're really feeling Arizona this week.
I guess so. I don't know. This is kind of making me nervous. I'm like way on the other side for some of these plays that I know you guys are normally like really locked in. So maybe I need to take a second look at some of this stuff.
Oh, any more? Chris, you got any?
I think in tournaments, Aaron Jones, maybe. I know Williams. I know that's been a crowded backfield, but again,
Aaron Jones tournament play.
Yeah, I think you're really just banking on touchdown. Last week was kind of annoying. He didn't get the touches inside the 5 that I thought he would get, and that's what he's gotten all year. He's been among the leaders in just red zone opportunities, and that's why he has 14 touchdowns on the season. But it is a tricky game when you're trying to decide, which guy. I mean, they've both been basically split over the last 4 weeks in terms of touches, and it's been Williams who's getting more of the work through the air. So that is a little puzzling, and I think that's why I'm willing to take a shot on one of them, and I would lean Jones. Again, double-digit home favorites here. There's it's a possibility, anyways, that Jones could get up to 15 carries. It's something he hasn't done since week 5. Yeah, wow.
Yeah, that's all I got on running backs. I'm not really going to go too much further off the board, I don't think.
No, I like the Aaron Jones play, and guess what, Chris? He's on DFS Pass. 10% off podcast. You can go read why I like Aaron Jones. I'm with you. So, wide receiver, since you got nobody else. How about, let's talk wide receiver. Let's talk a game that we didn't bring up. Houston. We didn't talk DeAndre Hopkins, and we didn't talk Will Fuller. Got to do it. What do you think, Joe?
I mean, he's in play for all the same reasons he was in play for so long earlier in the season. I think he's 5,500. He's cheap. I don't think he's going to draw a bunch of ownership in this matchup. And again, like he's top 20 in weighted opportunity over the last 4 weeks. I mean, still looking at things that like historically matter. This is what I'm looking at. He's 2.7 yards per out run. That's a really nice number. Like for just a little bit of context, Michael Thomas 2.7, Tyreek Hill 3.0. Like Will Fuller, I mean, I still think he's undervalued from a DFS perspective for his upside at that price. With some of these other guys in that range that I think probably have a higher floor for sure, I think that Will Fuller still has a crazy high ceiling.
I don't mind Hopkins and Watson. It's interesting to see Watson. It's certainly his price over on FanDuel. He's the 11th most expensive quarterback on FanDuel, and he just had a game where he had 3 touchdowns against the Pats. So are we really scared of the Broncos here with Watson? I mean, he's averaging 25 rushing yards per game. There's a slight decent floor there. So I think over on FanDuel, if you're a FanDuel player, I mean, he's pretty good. And even on DK, I mean, Matt Ryan, Cousins, these guys are more expensive than Watson, 6'5". I'm actually not afraid of the Broncos.
I wouldn't be that afraid to not start DeAndre Hopkins. You know how I feel about Will Fuller. I want to bring up somebody who I think should have been brought up in cash because of his price. And I think he's in play for both because at $6,600, I'm confused. Also, 6,800 on FanDuel against the Jacksonville defense that doesn't exist anymore. Keenan Allen. Have we pushed Keenan Allen that far? Are we disrespecting Keenan Allen that much? He's not even facing the Broncos, which everybody was scared about, Chris. And I said, like, oh, look, I'm starting Keenan Allen. This is seasonal, obviously. It's like, I'm not. Everybody's like, oh, well, did you see what happened the first go around? Yeah, back in the first 4 weeks of the season. Guess what? We're not playing that week of the season. Keenan Allen had a good game and still super tied for 85th in ownership.
Wow. And yeah, I kind of just glossed over him. I mentioned to him when we brought up Parker that Keenan Allen is cheaper than Parker. And just to look at the targets, I mean, nearly 30 targets over his last 3 games, 21 catches over his last 3 games. So as bad as he was in that middle stretch of the season, 9 points, 5, 10, 12, 7, 16, 21, 18. I mean, that's not bad at that price. And again, Jacksonville has just, they've been so bad. I mean, last week it wasn't Evans and Godwin that hit, but they had given up 10 touchdowns in the 2 games prior. So I like the spot, and I mean, tournaments for sure, I think, definitely. The one problem is Rivers, man. This guy looks awful.
Terrible.
It does look awful, but he's still getting Keenan Allen the ball.
Yeah, sure. I don't mind that price.
I think I might be on the Hunter Henry side of that passing offense. Like we mentioned Melvin Gordon before. I think he's fine for tournaments, but Hunter Henry's like in a weird price range where I don't think many people are going to play him. Like, what's his ownership right now, Jake?
On Hunter Henry?
Yeah.
I have to go back to tight end. So
okay.
Hold on. Give me a second.
Well, regardless, like that we were talking about routes run over the last 4. Like he's someone that I haven't played him a ton either, but like talking about just like alphas, like guys that are talented at tight end, like Hunter Henry. Yeah. Oh, so I kind of like that. I'm not a big Keenan Allen guy overall, so I don't know. I think I'd prefer just to play Hunter Henry.
Why do you hate Keenan Allen?
Just never seems to hit things that I care about for sure. And I don't know. I think it's a Rivers thing. Like you watch 5 minutes of that game and watch Rivers throw a ball right now. I just want to run the other way. So maybe both these guys are bad. Who knows?
Fair enough. Both of them are bad.
Yeah, Rivers looks awful. He really does.
He does. But Keenan Allen's working, though, so I'm okay with that. Anybody else at wide receiver? Who else? I was just about to bring somebody else, but I had to go to tight ends for Joe, making me bounce back and forth. So let me go back to wide receiver as I chew up time and speak a lot.
I think it's
Cortland
DJ
Sutton. That's what it was. Cortland Sutton.
Every week he's
super
in play
low.
for tournaments. Yep.
What about the Detroit guys?
Ooh, I don't know. I don't know if I really want to target the Vikings defense at home in a game they have to win.
They have no pass defense.
That's true. Rhodes has been one of the worst cornerbacks in the league this year.
That duo is one of the worst duos in all of NFL right now.
Interesting.
Yeah, he looks bad. David Blau, maybe 5'2". Marvin Jones 5'4". No chance. I'm not doing that.
Bunch of high stakes guys wanted to target.
I'm not talking about Blau. I'm talking
about
Kenny
Galladay.
But
yeah, Kenny Galladay. Yeah, I mean in tournaments it's not bad, right? He had the big catch last week, but 158, 5 targets, 4 catches. He's not on my radar. But you got to figure that they're probably going to have to throw the football. Minnesota's a tough team to run on. They're probably going to be behind.
Yeah,
that's it.
I don't think
that's all I got, man. There's nothing really else to say. I mean, it is David Blau after all. I mean, he did some good things last week in Chicago.
Then I'll ask a question again. All right, last one for you guys. If Adam Thielen plays, any interest in Thielen or Diggs?
I would have more interest in Diggs if Thielen played. Yes, I've said this a couple times that Thielen
more
has just...
Diggs than Thielen also. Is that what you're saying? Like more interest in Diggs, but also you would choose Diggs over Thielen in general also,
correct.
As well. Okay.
Yes, correct. Yeah, I've said this just a couple times. He's been taken away without Thielen. 4 yards, 49, 25. He had that one big game against Denver. He had a long catch. I think it was like a 60-yarder that he took to the house. But I think he needs Thielen on the field to hit. But, yeah, that Minnesota game is interesting because, again, we just don't know about Cook. Madison is going to come in, and this is an easy matchup for them. They're just going to run the football with Madison. Is he going to get 20 touches at that price? And if he is active and Cook's not, I'm just going to have all Madison. I'll probably avoid the passing game.
If Cook is in, do you guys have any interest in Cook in tournaments? Like, if no, I mean, these are the type of situations where people just don't play guys that are on the injury report and all that. Like, obviously, he leaves the game last week. It's an AC joint injury, I believe. So that's something that can definitely be a recurring injury. If he takes a hit, like, he could be out right away. So, like, right. $9,500 is a steep price tag to pay for that type of uncertainty. So, yeah, I don't know. Maybe he's the tournament play in the Minnesota game.
I like to play guys like that, Joe. Exactly. I mean, it is a pain tolerance thing. I'll probably take a couple shots before the game.
Exactly.
At 9.5.
I can actually speak to this specific injury. This is something that I had my last year in pro, and they can literally give you a cortisone shot. You don't feel a thing, literally. you don't feel anything. So if they just shoot him up with something like that, again, a game where they have to win, he said earlier in the week where he is absolutely playing. So, like, I have some interest in Dalvin Cook in tournaments if he does play, because I think that you hit the nail on the head, man. They're just going to give him a cortisone shot. It's a game they have to win. So I could see them leaning on him heavily and no one playing him.
No PEDs unless they're NFL PEDs.
Yeah, fair enough.
All right, anybody else before we talk tournament lineups overall, like stacking, GPPs, all that type of stuff, all the good stuff? Anything left? No,
that's it. Nobody else really on my radar.
Because that's all. I was going to hit tournament quarterbacks and tight ends because we kind of brought them all up in the conversations. Unless there's somebody you left out for you guys.
We talked about them, I guess. Yep.
Yeah.
All right, so then let's do our lineups and see if we have any stacks in them. So as we usually have been doing, we'll combine them.
Stack Attack. DFS Battle Royale.
All right. What do we got? Who's going first? Who's got the first one up this week? Joe, go.
I mean, I just assume none of you guys are going to have my stack anyway, but I'm going to give some people, I've been tinkering a little bit, so I'm going to give some people some options at the end, but this is going to be the one I'm going with in our three-man. So Sam Darnold, Le'Veon Bell, Robbie Anderson, since Jake hates Robbie Anderson, and get some leverage off of his Crowder that he probably has. Bring it back with my boy Lenny, and Parker as well. Parker in that game. Leonard Fournette's my little one-off for the Jacksonville side of the ball. Then, since you guys are hating on Kenyon Drake as a pivot off of kind of the Freeman side of things, I'll go Drake and Vance McDonald in that game, since no one's going to play Vance McDonald at that price point. I guess I'm a little bit off the board, but the one thing that I mentioned last week that I still want to kind of nail home for people that are building tournament lineups is really try and have your one-man game stack and then have a little bit of a mini stack from another game for the rest of your lineup is something that I really like to do. So Vikings defense, DJ Moore. Again, I think DJ Moore will be the guy that is the lower-owned piece in that salary range on FanDuel. So I'm kind of going that direction. If you did want to just put in Madison, it would get you up to Kittle as well. So that's the kind of 2v2, Vance McDonald, Kenyon Drake. If we do get the Madison value, you can just jam in Kittle at that point at tight end.
Nice.
All
right. I don't have any stacks because I'm playing Gardner Minshew, naked Minshew.
Let's go.
He's my quarterback. Nick Chubb, Melvin Gordon. My running backs, Devontae Adams, Julian Edelman, Tyler Boyd. Wide receivers, Jack Doyle, and for you guys, Devonta Freeman in there at flex. Bengals defense.
All the Drake leverage. Let's go.
All the Drake leverage. All right. Jameis is not naked this week, but I do have him in there. It's the mini stack. That's really all I have is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I almost considered putting Mike Evans in there, too, just to see if maybe it's that 1 week that they hit. If I don't go there, we talked about a couple of them that we do like for stack purposes. I think Carolina can be intriguing, but I'm not touching. That's if like a McCaffrey, DJ Moore, and I'll throw a flyer on Ian Thomas because it sounds like Greg Olson's out, like that kind of stack. So anyway, Jameis Winston at quarterback, Fournette, Devonta Freeman running back, DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Chris Godwin at wide receiver, Mike Gesicki at tight end, at flex Nick Chubb, and the Atlanta Falcons defense. I love this lineup. I don't know how I'm allowed to have all these players, which means it's going to score 50 points.
We've made it. We finally got Jake to play Gesicki on his team. Let's go.
I know. It's awesome.
But how great does that lineup sound?
It's normally the uncomfortable lineups that do well. That one sounds like you're pretty confident for whenever we're recording this on a Thursday.
I mean, it sounds amazing. I know it's probably not going to end up amazing because that's what happens, as you said.
I'm just pumped that I played Drake because I didn't expect both you guys to play Freeman because he's you don't have to play him on FanDuel. DraftKings he opens up a lot, but interesting. None of us play Christian McCaffrey either, huh?
I know.
No.
It's tough.
And I'm always nervous not playing McCaffrey in the three-man because I know that usually, Joe, you're all over him. And the one time I didn't play him, I think you both had him, and I had a great lineup, and I still didn't win because McCaffrey went
scored
off.
Like 50.
Yeah, interesting. I know I didn't give a stack in mind, but I do think that Odell and Baker is pretty interesting, despite having the Bengals defense in there.
And breaking news as we're closing this thing up, Adam Thielen didn't practice today, so there's your Adam Thielen question right there.
They don't need him to win that football game.
They don't, but it doesn't. It's not that hasn't been good for Diggs. But as a reminder for everybody out there, follow Chris at Chris Meaney. Follow Joe at Joe Holka. I'm at All In Kid. You guys know that. Make sure you check out DFS Pass. 10% off. Code podcast. And we'll be back, hopefully celebrating your winnings. Check us out on Twitter. Just do so. Celebrate. We'll retweet you. We want to see these winnings. And we want to see you come back next week. We always appreciate you listening. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Fantasy Footballers DFS Podcast. Don't forget to visit us on the web at www.thefantasyfootballers.com.